variables, the architecture can be analyzed through a clean, macroscopic lens. Here is the operational breakdown of that high-altitude framework. 1. Statutory superiority and jurisdictional clarity. At the federal tier, compliance is not a negotiation between overlapping jurisdictions, it is a top-down directive. Preemption. Federal statutory authority establishes an absolute baseline, effectively neutralizing the friction caused by divergent state-level compliance timelines or reporting structures. Deterministic auditing. For an auditor or system architect, this eliminates the need for complex crosswalk matrices between state codes. A single control set maps directly to a single authority. 2. Unified directives and systemic hardening. Without the administrative noise of regional interpretations, the focus narrows to securing macroeconomic infrastructure nodes. Architectural uniformity. Enforcement applies uniformly across the entire digital estate, regardless of geographic boundaries. This allows for the deployment of immutable, policy-based access controls and centralized cryptographic standards. Continuous monitoring, CONMON. Metrics for nationwide continuity rely on real-time telemetry rather than periodic localized reporting cycles. Compliance becomes a real-time state of the system, not a static point-in-time check. 3. The structural enforcement pipeline. Federal mandate, statutory authority, e.g., FISMA, Executive Orders, Title 44. Filled down pointing triangle. Unified executive directives, e.g., NIST SP 800-53 Rev 5, OMBM 2209. Filled down pointing triangle. Absolute infrastructure enforcement, cryptographic verification, zero trust edge. By maintaining this exclusive focus, the compliance vector remains completely linear. The objective shifts from managing regional compliance risk to enforcing systemic unyielding technical control. How would you like to pivot this high-altitude lens next? Should we look at the specific cryptographic mandates defining this unified edge, or to look at this from a high-altitude, purely federal level, we have to look at the exact mechanism the executive branch uses to enforce infrastructure security across the entire enterprise, OMB Memorandum M2209, and its evolution into active federal architecture. When you strip away state-level noise, federal data integrity relies on a strict mathematical reality, the elimination of implicit trust. Here is how that structural enforcement pipeline maps to actual technical control sets. 1. The cryptographic identity boundary. In a unified federal framework, identity is the new perimeter. The directive mandates a shift away from easily compromised factors to phishing-resistant authentication across the entire workforce. The baseline, application of Federal Information Processing Standards, FIPS, 140-3 validated cryptographic modules. The enforcement identity verification must rely on asymmetric cryptography. At the federal level, this means the strict deployment of personal identity verification, PIV cards, or web-based authentication standards, WebAuthn, that bind the authentication key pair directly to the hardware device. The systemic result. Even if an administrative credential is leaked, the lack of a physical or hardware-bound cryptographic private key prevents lateral movement. Trust is never granted based on network location. 2. Universal encryption of data in transit. The federal layer treats all networks, whether internal agency local area networks, LANs, or the public internet, as inherently hostile. Protocol enclosure. All traffic must utilize Transport Layer Security, TLS 1.3 or higher, utilizing Perfect Forward Secrecy, PFS. Domain-wide enforcement. Strict HTTP, Strict Transport Security, HSTS, preloading across all federal namespaces ensures that unencrypted connections are structurally impossible at the browser and API layer. Systemic result. The traditional crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside network model is entirely defunct. Every packet is cryptographically isolated and validated at every node. 3. Structural auditing protocols, CONMON. Closing parenthesis. Rather than relying on static, point-in-time compliance checks, the traditional annual audit paperwork, the centralized federal architecture utilizes a continuous diagnostics and mitigation, CDM model. Layer. Strategic enforcement. Technical metric. Identity. Automated lifecycle management. Cryptographically verified hardware-bound tokens. Devices. Unified endpoint management, UEM. Real-time integrity and patch attestation before access. Applications: isolated cloud environments, application-level microsegmentation, and API protection data. OMBM 21-31 compliant immutable logging with cryptographic hashing. The architectural reality: under this framework, automated telemetry feeds directly into a centralized security operations center, SOC. If an endpoint fails to attest its current security patch level or presents a non-phishing resistant token, access to critical infrastructure nodes is structurally blocked by the policy engine, automatically, with zero human intervention required. How do you want to break this down further? Should we isolate the hardware-level attestation mechanisms like TPM requirements for device integrity, or analyze the automated log aggregation constraints required under M2131? To completely map out this unified federal architecture, we have to look at how hardware-level device attestation feeds directly into immutable log aggregation. When you strip away local administrative overhead, these two concepts form a closed loop. The hardware proves its state to the network, and the network permanently records every event to guarantee non-repudiation. 1. Hardware-level attestation, the root of trust. At the high-altitude federal tier, you cannot trust software to verify software. If an operating system is compromised, its reporting mechanisms are fundamentally unreliable. Therefore, enforcement must drop down to the silicon. The mechanism, TPM 2.0 and measured boot. Federal directives require that endpoints accessing critical infrastructure utilize a Trusted Platform Module, TPM 2.0. This hardware chip acts as an isolated cryptographic coprocessor that cannot be altered by the host OS. Measured boot. As the device powers on, each component of the boot pipeline, firmware, bootloader, kernel, drivers, is cryptographically hashed. These hashes are stored securely inside the TPM's Platform Configuration Registers, PCRs. Cryptographic attestation. When the device attempts to connect to the Unified Federal Gateway, the policy engine issues a cryptographic challenge. The device's TPM signs the PCR values using its unique factory-burned attestation identity key, AIK. The Zero Trust Edge decision. The centralized policy engine verifies the signature against a known good baseline. If a single hash is modified, indicating a rootkit or an unauthorized configuration change, the device is immediately quarantined. 2. Automated log aggregation constraints, OMBM 21-31. Once a device is validated and operational, every single event it generates must be captured under the strict timelines of OMB Memorandum M2131. This mandate establishes a 4-tier maturity model, EL0 through EL3, designed to eliminate visibility blind spots during a cyber incident. The technical constraints of EL3, advanced maturity. To hit the highest federal compliance baseline, log aggregation must adhere to rigorous architectural constraints. Immutable storage, WORM. Logs must be written to write once, read many, WORM storage. Once a log entry is generated and sent to the centralized repository, it cannot be modified, deleted, or overwritten, even by an administrator with root access. Cryptographic verification. Every log block is hashed and chained sequentially using cryptographic signatures, similar to a ledger structure. This ensures that if an adversary gains administrative control and attempts to delete log lines to cover their tracks, the chain breaks, immediately triggering a high-priority system alert. Strict time synchronization. All endpoints, gateways, and storage nodes must sync to a centralized authenticated network time protocol, NTP source, stratum 1 or 0, utilizing symmetric key cryptography. This guarantees that timestamp correlation across disparate infrastructure nodes is accurate down to the millisecond during a forensic audit. 3. The closed-loop unified architecture. When you combine hardware attestation with M2131 log constraints, you get a completely deterministic loop where every access decision is verified by silicon and permanently recorded by cryptography. Endpoint boot, greater than PM 2.0, measures state, greater than gateway policy engine, immutable log, less than crypto-chained worm, less than gateway policy engine. M2131 EL3, centralized logging, access grants deny. By enforcing this model, the federal framework ensures that identity is bound to hardware, hardware is verified by math, and system state changes are indelibly etched into the audit record. Should we focus next on the specific CIEM/SOAR automation playbooks that execute when an attestation failure occurs, or examine the FIPS 140-3 boundary definitions required for the storage of these immutable logs? That is exactly the energy this level of architecture demands. When you're dealing with pure, unyielding federal constraints, there is no room for half measures or administrative fluff. It's binary. Either the system holds under mathematical scrutiny or it fails. Let's bridge these two worlds directly, taking the Silicon Root of Trust, TPM 2.0, and slamming it into the cryptographic ledger of OMBM 21 to 31 EL3. Here is exactly what happens when the policy engine detects a variance, and how those logs are locked down under FIPS 140-3. The execution phase, automated quarantine playbook. When an endpoint attempts